So this is Ada. How old are you?
6.
6. Yeah. So I asked her if she'd like to help me teach today, and what did you say? Yes, she said yes. So maybe she's going to help me teach. We'll see. So when I lived in Illinois, my son and I had this conversation, and I have no idea how similar this conversation will go, but hopefully it's similar enough to make the point that I would like to make. So Ada, do I love you? How do you know? How do you know that I love you? You don't know? Really? Do I hate you? I love you. I mean, do I love you? This is not going at all.
Question everything.
How do you know I love you? So when I did this with my my oldest son, we weren't in front of class. Someone had told him something and it had upset him. And I didn't agree with what they had told him. So we had a conversation about, like, what's the truth and how do we know things. So maybe some of you guys know that someone loves you. Do any of you, maybe you can, like, be my surrogate sort of daughter? So, Josie, how do you know that this person loves you?
They make me wear my seatbelt when I'm in the car.
They make you wear your seatbelt, right? And this is love. Maybe. So when I asked my, no, it's okay. So when I asked my oldest son if I loved him, he said, yeah. And I asked him, how do you know? And he said, are you sure you don't want to try this? How do you know that I love you? Do you want to go back to my office? You go to my office. Okay. All right. Well, you can go sit down if you don't want to help me. You want some M&Ms? All right. So I asked him, how do you know that I love you? And his answer was, you tell me that you love me. And I'm like, yeah, cool. So that must mean I love you, right? He's like, yeah. And I asked him, I'm like, what if I'm lying?
How would you do that?
Well, this is not the end of the conversation. I'm not that cruel.
Father of the year.
So, his jaw dropped, and I'm like, well, how could you tell if I was lying? And he's like, well, I could ask you if I was lying, or if you were lying. And I said, well, go ahead. And he said, are you lying? And I said, no, I'm not lying. I do love you. He's like, you do. And I said, how do you know I'm not lying now? How old was he? I think he was the same age. I think he was 6.
I don't like ruin your world.
No, it didn't ruin the world. I think he learned a lot from it. But anyway, so he said that, I could be lying to him. And I might or might not have been. And I said, well, what other things would allow you to know whether or not I loved you? And he didn't come up with, you make me put on my seatbelt, but he could have, right? So why do you think that someone making you put on your seatbelt is an indication of love?
So when or if I do crash, I don't go flying through the windshield.
Okay.
They want you not to die.
They want you not to die.
Have less probability of dying.
Okay, so we're assuming that if we love someone, we don't want them to die, or even experience serious painful injury, right? So that's consistent with love. So if you think about love and what is love, we're not going to talk so much about what is love, but scientists need to figure out, if we're going to look at love, like, what is love? How do we define love? How are we going to measure love? So the way that we're going to define or measure the things that we're interested in, known as operationalization, which I mentioned in the last class and which will be defined in the next reading. But so the operationalization that we've come up with, or at least my son did, was if someone tells you that they love you, that's indicative of love, right? So if someone tells you, please wear your seatbelt when you go out tonight, that's also an indication of love. I am jaded and cynical. So immediately after you said that, I thought of a very twisted interpretation to that that has very little to do with love. Can anyone think of something? It doesn't have to be what I'm thinking of.
Pushing the car in water.
Pushing the car.
Oh, God.
Oh, make sure you're wearing your seatbelt. No, that was not what I was thinking. I was sort of thinking like you're going off alone. But that would work too. Wear your seatbelt. I want the insurance payment.
You don't want to get pulled over by the cops.
Okay, maybe you don't want them to get pulled over by the cops. Are you dependent on this person?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you're dependent on them, which means what happens if you get in a crash and don't die? Let's say you just get injured. Or even if you do die.
Medical expenses.
Medical expenses. So maybe they don't really love you at all. They just don't want to shell out, oh God, co-payments.
Sure.
Right?
So then if they give you money, they love you.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that my son brought up is that his grandma loves him so much more than I do, because grandma buys him more stuff. And I had to correct him on this. And he thought I was lying, actually, when I told him that I pay for the water that comes out of the tap. And because there's not a direct exchange, it's not like, put the money in the thing and turn on the water, you just turn it on. He thought it was free. So I had to explain to him that no, every month I get a bill, and I pay for it, and I actually spend a lot more money on you than grandma. And he's like, okay. So, spending money on you. So I spend money on my kids. I spent money on you guys today.
You love me.
Do I love you guys?
Yes.
You may not know it yet.
I don't know. So why would someone spend money on someone they don't love?
Bribery.
For their own benefit?
For their own benefit. Because if I don't spend money on Ada and feed her and clothe her, the DCFS is going to come knocking, the sheriff's department's going to throw me in the clink, and that's going to be expensive, and that kind of sucks. More expensive than like just paying a water bill, right? So I buy my kids stuff that they have to have to save my butt, maybe. You're told to put on your seatbelt, maybe to stop, or minimize the expenses. Oh, single lady. Wait, how does it sound? Single lady. Oh, right. And I'm Brittany. Single, bingle. Alvin and Chipmunk's first one, most brilliant part of the movie is that single ladies skit. Brilliant. Show all the single ladies and non-single ladies. I'm guessing at some point you had a heterosexual male approach you and say something like, I love you. Do they? Do they love you? Or maybe they lust for you. So the saying I love you, the buying people stuff, the telling you to get your seatbelt on, none of this stuff proves that someone loves you. What are other things that people do? Ada, what other things do I do? What things do I do that make you think I love you?
Tickle me?
I tickle her. Do people that love one another tickle one another? They can. I was going to say, I know some straight guys who, I would say, love each other, and like the tickling thing might not happen.
You don't know the right guys.
I know, they're missing out, right? No, but a lot of times parents will tickle their kids, right? And the parents that love their kids probably are going to tickle their kids more than if they despise their kids, right? So the tickling the kid is consistent with love. But it's also consistent with other things like torture. God. That's funny because when I was a kid, I loved it when my dad would tickle me, and I'd go get an edit and we'd tickle and tickle and tickle, but he wouldn't stop when I said stop. Oh, I'd end up crying. And then mom would be like, come in and say, you need to stop tickling him, listen to him, he's crying. I'd be like, Mom, get away! Because I like the tickling, it was fun. But so yeah, maybe it's torture. I was thinking entertainment for me, because it's funny watching them squirm when I tickle them, especially when I get my middle son, he just like falls over. Sort of like a narcoleptic dog almost. Right, Ada? Yeah. So maybe I tickle him because I love him. Maybe I tickle him because it's amusing to me. What other things, Ada? Are there other things I do that make you think I love you?
Wrestle me.
I wrestle with her. How do I wrestle with you? Like, do I wrestle you to pin you down and not let you get back up? Or do we wrestle and have fun and throw each other? Well, I guess she doesn't throw me around. Yeah. Is it fun or is it like mean?
Fun.
Yeah, it's fun, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to be, a tough girl. Try to get out of this. Because I want her to be prepared for the dangers of collegiate life. No, so we have a lot of fun with it. And that's consistent. Having fun with someone is consistent with loving them. And it's interesting because some people that you might not love when you first meet them or think you're even interested in them, like my wife and I, we both didn't like each other very much. I was very conservative at the time. I was a business major and I was taking differential equations, and I came up to her and I'm like, have you taken differential equations? And she's wearing bell bottoms and has a bandana and long hair, and I thought she was a lesbian feminazi. She was a women's studies major. But anyway, we started hanging out because we lived in the same place, and we ended up having a lot of fun together, and then we fell in love. So love is consistent with, did I say love is consistent? Having fun with someone is consistent with loving them, but it can also just be, we're having fun, right? So all of these little pieces of evidence could point to different things. You could say rich people have it rough. You hear about people like Kanye West or other people, and they don't know who their friends are. Why? Yeah, maybe their friends want the money. So a lot of them, they have a small cadre of like close friends, maybe from high school, that they spend a lot of time with, that they know and that they trust. But they meet someone else and they seem nice and they seem pleasant. And, all of these things that I'm doing for my daughter, I tell her I love her, I hug her, I kiss her, right? Do I yell at you? No? Never?
Sometimes.
Sometimes I yell at her. Well, that's maybe not necessarily consistent with love. Love is kind and patient and all that jazz, and if I'm yelling at her, maybe I'm not too patient. I like Iowa. I don't know. Take child development, you'll learn about yelling and whatever maybe you had already. Anyway, so I yell at my kids, and not all the time. It's not like, what? Have you done your homework? Get over there! But occasionally I do lose it, and I do yell at them, right? So there's some evidence that is consistent with love, and there's some evidence that's consistent with hate. So how does she know? And I would argue, based on my reading, that what would she know? Yeah, she doesn't really know. She can't know, because maybe I am doing loving things more often than hating things, because she has rich relatives that don't like me very much, but that like her a lot, and they're about to die. And I want in. And she's not going to get anything now. It's not like, I'll watch over your trust and I won't spend your money. No, it's going to go into a trust, and she'll get it when she's 18. I want her to take care of me. Right? That would be consistent with me acting more loving than hating. So she could never know for sure. But what do most of us do? Most of us don't walk around like, is gravity working right now? Can I put down my, thank goodness. Right? I mean, we can't ever know in this definitive sense, but what we use the word know anyway. We know enough, right? We've had enough experiences, whether it be from our own senses or from other people telling us, that we trust that certain things are true. And I would argue that even though you can never really know if someone loves you, you can certainly figure out whether the probability is so high that you don't need to really question that anymore. Right? And it's not about absolute proof. I can't absolutely prove to you that I love her. I think I do. I can't absolutely prove to you that I'm William Knapp. Can I? No, why not?
Well, you can say it all you want until there's like something valid.
Valid, like what?
A birth certificate.
I
That's what
can
they need
produce
for
one of
all.
those.
DNA testing.
But so can Obama. Obama can produce a birth certificate.
Oh, gosh. This economy.
So you want something valid, right? So the birth certificate, this is something that you may weigh more heavily as evidence. Right? But it's not definitive proof. Birth certificates are going to be forged. Potentially. Or maybe even a legitimate authority can release a birth certificate if you give them enough dough. Is there anything else that I could do to prove to you that I'm William Knapp? Okay, so someone said DNA samples. Right? So if you looked at my DNA, you'd be like, oh, that's William Knapp. So I was in the Navy. They took my DNA. So there is my DNA on file somewhere, and someone could, sample this DNA and see if that matches up to the William Knapp who was in the Navy, and they could say, aha, it's a match. It's William Knapp. Does that mean I'm William Knapp?
No, because you could have lied earlier.
Could have lied earlier. I could really be, let me use my stepbrother's name, Jesse Murphy. I could be Jesse Murphy. Not my stepbrother Jesse Murphy, but a different Jesse Murphy. I could have been switched in the hospital. Whoops. So, am I William Knapp? I don't know for sure. But there's enough evidence out there. I mean, if you look at my grandfather, you look at my father, and you look at me, the resemblance is fairly striking. And you look at my son, and it's like, whoa. And you look at our personalities, although that's could be more nurture than nature, right? But there are a lot of consistencies. So you look at evidence like that. You look at my birth certificate. You may look at my DNA. You may look at the things that I tell you. You may not just go to my door and see the William Knapp there, but do other types of work, right? And based on the overall collection of evidence, you can come to a conclusion that it's reasonable that I believe that that's William Knapp, or Derek, or that your grandpa was president of Eagle Computers, which, by the way, if I didn't say this, that is pretty cool. Anyway, so let's talk briefly about epistemology. What is epistemology?
Study of knowledge.
Yeah, it's the study of knowledge, and it's really useful because it helps us to understand what knowledge is and how we can acquire it, even really if there is such a thing as true or pure knowledge. So let's talk about some of the ways of acquiring knowledge. Nativism, what is it?
It's innate sources.
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
So the knowledge is basically what then? Breathing, did you say?
Like an example, sorry.
Was that the one that I used in my...
I didn't say that.
Okay, all right. Can anyone think of another thing that people know when they're born that isn't related to sensory experience? I was going to say, because you could say, oh, I know the sound of my mother's voice because there's a lot of evidence that infants in the womb can recognize the voice of those who are around them regularly, or the patterns of stories that are told to them, or music. So they can know those things, but that's still sensory experience, right? So knowing things by means of your senses, what is that? It's not nativism, it's empiricism. Very good. So that would be empiricism, but what else do we know natively? So we know natively how to breathe, right? You get out and maybe you don't do it right away, so you get a whack and you just start doing it. You know how to do it. Hopefully, or else you get all.
Move around. I mean, in most cases.
Know how to move around.
How to cry.
Know how to cry. It helps us get attention. It allows us to get food. It allows us to get warm. It allows us to get, all sorts of things that we need when we're infants. I would argue that we know, well, I guess it is an argument. We know how to associate things, right? We're born knowing how to learn. Dog. It's not a good imitation at all. But we have this innate ability to pick up on some of these things. So sure, we have some type of innate knowledge. And we also pick up a lot of things by using our senses. What is rationalism? Knowledge by reason. What's an example of knowledge by reason besides John's ethnicity? If you read the text, that should make sense.
Oh,
Yeah, but besides that one, because that's an example I gave you. Can you guys think of an example of how you can come to know something by thinking? Socrates was a man. Wasn't a man. May have been a man. We have a lot of evidence to suggest that there was a man named Socrates. And all men are
created equal.
some of these. Okay, that was not the one I was thinking. There's a famous saying, Socrates was a man. All men are mortal. I like yours better. All men are pigs.
So in that case,
Socrates was a pig.
people are feminazis.
There's nothing that says that you can't be a feminazi if you're not female, so you work it. So, I'm a male, I'm moral, mortal, maybe I'm moral. So, what does that mean? I'm going to die. I can reason that one out.
No.
How do I know that people die? That all men die?
Because there's no man.
There's funeral, there are no men that have, not died. There are records of some men that haven't died. Right?
Yeah.
The Bible has some stories about men that haven't died. There are some other situations, but if you look at, everyone that you know that has died, I mean, there's, people die. You go look at the cemeteries, go look at, and you have people that are 120, but you don't have people that are 1,000. You have people that are, 116, but not people that are way older than them. People die. So, we use our senses to collect some of this information. Maybe not just our senses, we use the things that other people tell us. What method of acquiring knowledge would that be? Authority, which is, you have to use your senses to pick up on the authority, right? So people die, you take that, you see with your own eyes that people die, use your senses, and you maybe use a little bit of intuition and logic to come to the conclusion that all men are going to die, all women are going to die. Does that make sense? Deal with it. So today is a special day, and when I woke up this morning, I was fooled twice. It said Stan Lee died, and I was like, no!
Oh, God.
And it said Microsoft released a new Linux operating system. I was like, what?
Doesn't make sense.
What do I need? A little bit more of on a day like this.
Skepticism.
Yeah, I need a bit more skepticism, which is sort of this approach that I was using when I was talking about love, right? If I really love this person, how can we know? Maybe we can never know, but we need to look at all the evidence in totality, right? And by looking into all the evidence in totality to base our decisions on and what we're going to do in research and what classes we're going to take. Is basket weaving going to help you more than research methods? Which one are you going to spend more time on this semester? Right? You need to make what type of decisions about that information? Practical or pragmatic decisions. So skepticism and pragmatism, these aren't so much of ways of acquiring knowledge, but ways of viewing knowledge and the usefulness of different types of knowledge. And I believe I'm out of time given that people are packing up. Thank you for the extra 2 minutes. I'll see you guys on Friday.